What's up everybody, Commander Sanctum here, and today we have a deck tech using the 6th Doctor and Nardole Resourceful Cyborg as partners. I chose this combination for one specific reason. This Doctor Who partner pair currently has 0 decks according to EDHRec. That's right, not a single deck is listed using the 6th Doctor and Nardole. This presented a unique deck building challenge, one that piqued my interest as it will be 100% from scratch and something that no one else has done. It's really interesting to me that there aren't any decks using this combination, as you can use a very common theme to make it pretty strong. That theme would be +1/+1 counters. This deck tech will focus more specifically on Nardole, giving him +1/+1 counters to allow us to cast big X spells to close out the game. That being said, the 6th Doctor's clone ability is nothing to scoff at, as it can give us more Nardoles to use for even more mana in even bigger spells. With that, let's get into the card highlights. To start with, we need things that will give our Nardole +1/+1 counters. It's important to have sources of consistent counters, something that can be perpetually used, in case Nardole gets killed and needs to restart at 0. Xiangyanggu Wildcrafter is a great source of counters, especially when paired with a Proliferate source to make sure he always has loyalty to use. Forgotten Ancient will almost always add multiple counters to Nardole at every upkeep, and is a great engine to use to make Nardole big quickly. Simic Ascendancy not only allows you to pay mana to add counters, it also acts as an alternate win con that, in a deck like this, will be easy to attain. In addition to consistent counters, we also want cases of more burst counters, to get our Nardole big as quickly as possible. Kami of Whispered Hopes is great, especially paired with consistent counter sources, as it simply gives the creature another counter whenever it gets one. Invigorating Surge and Voral of the Hullclade both double the counters on a creature, providing likely the best way to make our Nardole an absolute monster and be able to generate an extreme amount of mana. Since Nardole can generate an extreme amount of mana if there are a ton of counters on him, there's almost nothing better than X spells that add counters to a creature. Strength of the Chijuru and Lifecraft Awakening are 2 such spells that add X number of counters to a creature. Since Nardole is an artifact creature, Lifecraft Awakening is an extremely efficient way to do this. Repulsive Mutation also does this, with the added benefit of being able to counter a spell. Since Nardole will likely be large at this point, it's unlikely that the opponent will be able to pay to prevent the counter, making this an extremely efficient spell. Since we're in Simic colors, we have access to some of the best Proliferate sources out there. Specifically, consistent Proliferate sources like Evolution Sage and Flux Channeler are absolute powerhouses in this deck. Flux Channeler in particular, since we'll be casting a large number of non-creature spells thanks to Nardole's mana restriction, is amazing in this deck and is likely one of the best cards we have access to. Especially when combined with something like Kami of Whispered Hopes, adding 2 +1/+1 counters per non-creature spellcast. Since we will want to generate as much mana as possible with Nardole, using creature untap abilities allows us to generate double or more of the mana we normally could. Dramatic Reversal is one such way to do this, with the added benefit of being able to use Nardole's generated mana to cast it. Minamo School at Water's Edge is another excellent way to do this, albeit only once a turn unless you have a way to untap the land. Finally, Freed from the Real is the ultimate untap method for Nardole, letting us tap and untap him for as many blue sources as we have access to. While this card is used for infinite combos in most situations, it's important to note that it does not work like that with Nardole. Since Nardole's mana can only be used to cast non-creature spells, you can't use any of that mana to untap him with Freed from the Real, since that is the inactivated ability. This means that you can only use blue mana generated from other sources, like lands or mana rocks, to untap him. So for those who don't like infinite combos in their decks, there's no concern here with Freed from the Real. Once we have a large Nardole and the ability to generate big mana, we need something to pump it into to win the game. One such way to do this is to use X spells that generate tokens. Awaken the Woods is probably the best and most efficient way to do this. Not only does it give us even more mana due to the creatures being forests, it gives us a huge army that we can use to kill our opponents. Gelatinous Genesis is a bit more mana intensive due to the double X, but with enough mana will still give us an army that is both wide and tall exponentially. Finally, we have Sylvan Offering, which while it also gives some of our opponents either a large army or big creature, allows us to more strategically focus our opponents that are the biggest threat, potentially ending them immediately. Additional win cons include Biomass Mutation, which will make all of our creatures, such as our Forest Dryad tokens from Awaken the Woods, absolutely huge and insanely lethal. Mass Manipulation will let us kill our opponents with their own creatures, easily allowing you to take control of the entire board with the amount of mana Nardole will be generating. Hurricane is a bit of an iffy one. It can very easily end games, but unless you have more life than all of your opponents, will also likely kill you as well. But hey, if you ever want to go out on your own terms or end the game in a draw, there's going to be no better way. This deck will also have a bit of a clone sub-theme, both with the 6th Doctor and a few other cards. By making more Nardoles, we have the ability to more spread out our mana generation, giving us more resistance to removal, while also potentially increasing our mana generation significantly. Helm of the Host and Quantum Misalignment both give us multiple tokens at different times, potentially giving us an army of Nardoles at our disposal. Spark Double is great because the copied Nardole will come in with a +1/+1 counter on it, allowing it to immediately generate mana and making our lives a bit easier since we'll already have the first counter on them. Finally, there are a few utility cards that work well with this theme. The Ozolith is a powerhouse, especially in a meta where Nardole is constantly being removed, as it will let us preserve the number of counters we've pumped into him when we inevitably have to recast him. Bioshift is a bit similar in this regard, letting us move any +1/+1 counters from a Nardole that is being targeted with removal to potentially a copy token of him or some other creature. Wildest Dreams lets us get back our best cards out of our graveyard, and since we're a big mana deck anyways, will likely let us return pretty much all the cards we want, regardless of how much we have in the yard. Here is an example deck list utilizing all the previously mentioned cards. We have quite a few more +1/+1 counter sources like Azuri Claw of Progress and Master Biomancer, a ton of Expel card draw sources like Even the Score and Blue Sun Zenith that work well with the additional win con in Laboratory Maniac, and Expel based removal like Curse of the Swine and Distorting Wake. Honestly, this deck can be extremely powerful, and I'm shocked that there hasn't been more about this partner combination. To be fair, this is more of a Nardole deck than anything. The 6th Doctor is mostly there to facilitate our access to green and allow us to get an additional copy of Nardole later in the game if he is getting consistently removed. Speaking of which, if Nardole isn't consistently removed, this deck is very easy to snowball and completely take over a game. I've had multiple times where an unchecked Nardole has allowed me to steal or bounce literally every single creature and non-land permanent of my opponents, giving me free reign to do whatever I like. The amount of card draw you can attain in this deck is insane, potentially being able to draw almost half of your deck in a single turn. Another thing to keep in mind is that, while Nardole's main purpose is as a mana generator, the counters we're putting on him are +1/+1 counters, meaning he is a monstrous commander creature that can easily kill opponents with commander damage. Suffice it to say, this deck has the potential to be insanely powerful if not checked early and often. That being said, if Nardole is being consistently removed, it can be a bit hard to get momentum, so interaction-heavy opponents are a bit of a bane for this deck. Still, this deck is both a fun and powerful one, so I'd recommend checking it out if unique commanders is your thing. I hope you enjoyed watching this deck tech on the 6th Doctor and Nardole Resourceful Cyborg. The full deck list outlined in this video can be found at the Architect link at the top of the description. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to drop a like and comment, as well as subscribe to the channel for more Magic content. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.